North Wilkesboro Speedway made its triumphant return to national television today, and it was nostalgic, comedic, full of great racing action. We're going to talk about today's final Pro Invitational iRacing event. This one was at North Wilkesboro Speedway. A lot of great stuff to talk about. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. And I just have a big smile on my face. I just got done watching, of course, the Pro Invitational race at North Wilkesboro. This Cup Series iRacing season has now come to an end as the real racing season is set to jump back into action this coming weekend at Darlington, May 17th. I am hyped for that, but before we get to talking about real race cars and real racing once again very soon here, we have to talk one last time about iRacing. Today's race at North Wilkesboro Speedway was a ton of fun. Had some drama, had some great bits in the broadcast booth. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's just get started as we usually do when I do these videos. Let's start off by talking about the racetrack itself, because that was the selling point for today's race. North Wilkesboro Speedway, which has not held a NASCAR race since 1996, it's back. It's been restored in a virtual sense. Of course, at the end of last year, Dale Earnhardt Jr. kind of led a team from iRacing out to the real racetrack in North Carolina to clean it up and get it presentable so that it could be scanned, and over the last several months could be worked into the simulation. And today was sort of the first public reveal, the first racing action that the new racetrack has seen on iRacing. And let me just say, the racetrack today looked beautiful. I mean, from the old retro, vintage signage for the racetrack, the logo on the walls, the patterns on the walls, the guardrails on the infield, the various grandstands, they modeled it to look more like how the track did in the mid-1980s. So you had the grandstands on the front stretch, you had some on the back stretch, and in the corners you had fans standing along the guardrail. The track looked absolutely gorgeous. I must say, this was the most picturesque racetrack that this Pro Invitational Series has competed on to date. I mean, virtual Texas looked great, virtual Bristol looked great, but virtual North Wilkesboro, it just hit different. I'd seen all the renderings beforehand and I was like, okay, it looks cool, but the moment the pace lap started, and we saw race cars on the tracks, many of them rocking kind of vintage throwback paint schemes, I saw it. It hit me. Even I, who never saw NASCAR at North Wilkesboro Speedway, they stopped racing there before I was even born, even I felt a weird twinge of nostalgia for something I've never really seen. I mean, I've obviously seen some replays, seen some clips, and seen a lot of the highlights they've been showing the last couple weeks, but I'd never seen or sat down and watched an entire North Wilkesboro race. Well, that's not entirely true. I've watched a good amount of some of the replays, because you can find some of them on YouTube. So I've watched a decent amount of some of the old North Wilkesboro races, but my point is I never sat down and watched them live, definitely not when they happened, and even I, somehow, felt a weird off-putting twinge of nostalgia when I saw those race cars, many of them, again, like I said, in kind of throwback paint schemes on the virtual North Wilkesboro Speedway. It looked amazing. It looked like a lot of those old photographs that we all see that are kind of grainy, kind of worn out. It looked like those old photographs remastered and brought back to real life, brought to the present day. And it was mission accomplished. It looked great. From a purely aesthetic point of view, today's race looked phenomenal. Easily looked better than any of the other Pro Invitational races so far. All the other tracks look great and everything, but Texas Motor Speedway was just a big concrete jungle. Dover is just literally a big concrete slab in the middle of Delaware there. North Wilkesboro has a bit more charm to it. It's got the grass, it's got the curb that you can hit on the inside lane, the guardrails, of course, which a couple guys just went head on into a few times. Those concrete walls on the outside too got quite the workout. Not up to modern safety standards. Good thing it's a virtual world, but North Wilkesboro, yeah, it looked beautiful. So talking about the racetrack itself and the history that kind of brought, obviously the teams from iRacing and Dale Jr. and everyone to bring it into the virtual world, really, really cool. I'm hopeful that they can do this now with a lot of other kind of historic racetracks. I think of ones that have closed, like Texas World Speedway, not too far from where I grew up. I believe is now closed down forever, is officially closed. It'd be cool if they could get out there and scan that track, preserve that track, because if we can't have all these historic racetracks still in operation in the real world, it'd be pretty cool if we were able to take advantage of this technology iRacing possesses to have them restored in the virtual world. So people my age or even younger can still race at a lot of these historic and iconic racetracks long after they are gone from real life. But yeah, North Wilkesboro Speedway was a great experiment, and they nailed it. It looked beautiful. I want to talk about the broadcast for a moment too. I'm not going to talk about the broadcast today as much as I have in past videos. I often dwell on the broadcast because, like I've said from the beginning, I think the way Fox and Fox Sports has have presented these races is the most important factor as to how entertaining these broadcasts actually are. Some of the races earlier in this Pro Invitational weren't super great, like with the racing itself, there was a lot of cautions, kind of sloppy at times, sometimes glitchy, but the broadcast with Clint Boyer offering his banter, and of course Mike Joy and Michael Waltrip and Larry McReynolds and Jeff Gordon, their broadcast for most of this Pro Invitational was really, really good and often elevated what was actually being seen on the racetrack. Last week's race was noticeably less enjoyable because Clint Boyer was not on the broadcast. He was not racing in the race, and he was not in the studio in any capacity, and Clint Boyer was really the life. He really is the energy behind a lot of these broadcasts. But this week, I will say this. Mike Joy deserves a round of applause, a standing ovation. He brought the energy like it was 1996. He was on his game. He was hilarious. The little subtle dig at Pontiac. His excitement when he found Steve Myers and Dale Jr. like in the little ticket booth on the infield of the racetrack. Like, Mike Joy genuinely seemed extremely excited to be calling this race, to be on this broadcast, and to see North Wilkesboro back in all its glory. And so that was really cool to see, because Clint Boyer, of course, he's back. Jeff Gordon was also racing, and they had the two of them side by side racing in the studio together. They were as hilarious as ever, so they brought the energy back. They brought the comedy. They brought the funny bits. Of course, my favorite highlight of the race was when Clint Boyer asked Jeff Gordon to repave the track out of his own pocket, because, Jeff, you got a lot of money. I thought that was pretty funny. Clint Boyer is going to be a much better broadcaster than he was a driver, than he is a driver. I mean, he's a decent driver. He's a good driver, but he's going to be a phenomenal broadcaster. He's going to be iconic when he gets to the booth, which I have a feeling will be sooner rather than later. So he was a ton of fun to watch. Jeff Gordon was really fun to watch. I thought they broadcast the race very well, very nicely done. This honestly felt like one of the best put together broadcast from start to finish. They had their historical stats. They had obviously the ability to promote next week's action at Darlington, which is real racing action, so that was a benefit to them. The cutaways to Ray Everham, where he was looking through old notes of his from when he raced or was a crew chief at North Wilkesboro. Also him in his garage looking at old race cars, seeing that old Jeff Gordon car in his garage. I mean, that was really cool television. I mean, some people I saw on Twitter were saying, hey, can we get like a mini series of just Ray Everham showing us his stuff? And I'd watch it. I mean, 'cause that was pretty cool. Those are some of the highlights of the broadcast. So I felt like overall today, they put a lot of effort in, and they were clearly prepared for today's broadcast, North Wilkesboro race. So the broadcast, as pretty much every week of this series so far has been, gets a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. It was perfect. Wouldn't change a thing about it. It was hilarious. It was informative. It was energetic. It was beautiful. Great job, Fox. Honestly, great job all around. My last little hurrah. Great job by Fox and FS1 to bring us these races as well as they did, as effectively as they did, as entertainingly as they did on such short notice. I mean, this is a completely unprecedented event. They had to scramble, come up with this whole idea within like a week, and they hit it. They hit a home run, and it's slowly evolved as the series has gone on. It's continued to get better and better, with the exception of last week when there was no Clint Boyer and the race at Dover was just kind of there. But aside from last week, clearly it got better week after week. So credit to Fox, who their real life broadcasts have become kind of stale in recent years. I was thoroughly impressed and very surprised, and pleasantly surprised I should say, that their iRacing broadcast was as impressive as it was these past few weeks. So kudos to Fox. That's all I have to say about the broadcast. They nailed it. Let's talk about the race itself. I haven't even mentioned who won this thing yet. I'll flash up the top finishers right there, but Denny Hamlin, who actually got this whole Pro Invitational started by winning at Homestead Miami like a month and a half ago, he got the win today, so he put bookends this series with 2 wins. He made a late race move on Ross Chastain. He had a little fresher tires than Chastain after Chastain opted to only go with 2 on the final pit stop. He didn't really waste much time. He kind of nudged Chastain out of the way first chance he got. Ross was blocking a little bit, but it was all fair game. It was really just an aggressive bump and run. Chastain later got in trouble with other cars, but really wasn't Hamlin's fault at that point. Just an aggressive bump and run. Not an issue with Denny Hamlin doing that there. Of course, Chastain spun him after the checkered flag, but it's a virtual world. I mean, you're not tearing up real sheet metal. I didn't have a problem with little retaliation at that point, but good racing up front, hard racing. I was really impressed. North Wilkesboro Speedway, obviously I've seen some of the old races, but obviously these are completely new race cars. They're running the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series cars with, this version of the package has lower downforce and a little bit higher horsepower, so these cars handle a bit differently than any car that's ever raced at North Wilkesboro in the past, and it was pretty cool to see. This track had 2 distinct grooves. On the restart, sometimes the outside was the preferred lane, sometimes the inside was the preferred lane. Often it would depend on who you got stuck behind when you were 2x2 lined up on the restart. But I appreciate a short track that has more than one raceable group, because it presents the opportunity for a lot of great side-by-side action. A few massive wrecks, but it never really got out of hand, and in fact we had a pretty long green flag run at one point. It went about 60 or 70 laps, and with the track having a worn-out surface, which they were able to accurately recreate in the simulation, we saw tire management come into play, and some drivers would move up the field and then slowly fade throughout that run. Pit strategy came into play at the end. It was a really good overall race, and I was just extremely excited to see side-by-side action, beating and banging, leaning on each other, some guys upset, some guys apologizing. It was a pretty darn good short track. It kind of reminds everyone why North Wilkesboro was a staple on the NASCAR Cup schedule for, what, 50 years? Almost, I guess. I mean, it's an iconic short track for a reason, and today offered just a snippet as to why. A bit of a reminder, if you will. Of course, with none of the Hendrick drivers racing, William Byron, Alex Bowman, Chase Elliott, Jimmy Johnson, none of them raced. None of the Penske drivers, including Matt Benedetto, raced in today's race. Neither did Kurt Busch. So the field was a bit thinner than it had been the last few weeks. But you had Bobby Labonte up there running in the top 10, top 15 for a while. Jeff Gordon obviously was back in the rainbow car, which was cool to see. John Wood in the 21 Wood Brothers car was pretty random, I must say, but he put on a good showing. He was not a hazard out there by any means. Martin Truex Jr. also raced in his first Pro Invitational race of the season and looked pretty competitive at times. So, of course, Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was instrumental in getting North Wilkesboro onto iRacing, ran top 5 all day. He was kind of caught up in someone else's mess at the very end and did not get a good finish, but Dale Jr., of course, showed well at the track that he's worked so hard to get involved in iRacing. So that was good to see. Great performances all around, great storylines. It was a little funny to see a Toyota, a Denny Hamlin-driven Toyota, go to victory lane at North Wilkesboro Speedway, which, when North Wilkesboro Speedway closed, Toyota was not in NASCAR. It really was not even a thought at that point. So kind of ironic, kind of interesting, kind of funny, but it was a great race. Had a lot of fun watching it. Of course, this is going to further ignite the debate. Could North Wilkesboro, the real racetrack in real life, ever get back into raceable condition? Could we ever see NASCAR, maybe the trucks or Xfinity or ARCA or something like that? Could we ever see one of those series return to that racetrack in the next few years? It's going to rejuvenate those conversations for sure. Obviously, they have the whole Save the Speedway movement going on over there with North Wilkesboro. It is a Speedway Motorsports owned racetrack, but they have not had the funding or the resources in recent years to really do anything with the racetrack, which is why it sits largely abandoned out there in northern North Carolina. The success of today's race, in my opinion, is certainly going to add to the movement that many fans, especially local fans in that region, have been pushing for the return to this iconic short track. I still don't see it as realistic, especially not anytime soon. I mean, it would take a major investment, and with this pandemic now especially, I don't see any of these companies in a position to make such a significant investment. It honestly might take someone like Dale Earnhardt Jr. or Jeff Gordon, as Clint Boyer sort of joked earlier today. It honestly might take someone like that to truly just invest into the racetrack out of passion for racing, passion for the history of it. It's going to take something like that, I feel like, because from a pure business standpoint, in my opinion, and I'm not a businessman so much, there's a lot of risk and not a lot of reward at play in dumping a bunch of money to reinvigorate North Wilkesboro Speedway, because that track would need a complete overhaul. North Wilkesboro Speedway, of course, sitting there abandoned largely, is kind of a reminder of NASCAR's boom and then its bust, so to speak. Of course, North Wilkesboro closed in 1996 largely due to the fact that NASCAR was growing in popularity so rapidly, and they were building a lot of other large mile-and-a-half mostly type racetracks around the country to expand into new markets, to allow for, instead of 30 or 40,000 fans to attend a race, 140,000 fans to attend a race, and as a result, North Wilkesboro kind of got swallowed up by some of the other newer racetracks on the circuit. I'm thinking about places like Texas Motor Speedway, Kansas Speedway, Chicagoland Speedway, Homestead Miami Speedway. There's about a 5, 6, 7 year span where a lot of those racetracks were built, and at the time they were absolute gold mines for NASCAR. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it was obvious why NASCAR was building Texas Motor Speedway, and it made a ton of sense financially. The first race at Texas Motor Speedway had 200,000 people in attendance. Hindsight is always 20/20, and obviously knowing what we know now, it's clear that NASCAR's huge boom in the 90s and early 2000s was largely short-lived. It did not continue at the rate NASCAR, I think, projected or was hoping, and in hindsight, now a lot of those racetracks like Texas, like Homestead Miami, like Chicagoland, have become a bit too big for their britches, so to speak. Now NASCAR is looking for more short tracks. They're looking for venues that seat 40, 50,000 fans, like Phoenix, like Watkins Glen, like places like that. North Wilkesboro in theory, would fit the bill perfectly for what NASCAR is looking for right now. But it's going to take someone with a lot of money and a lot of respect for the history of the racetrack and a lot of admiration and love for the racetrack to really come in there and make that investment, because it's not going to be cheap to redo and maintain North Wilkesboro Speedway given its current condition. Even before this pandemic, which has caused Speedway Motorsports to lay off 15% of its workforce, if not more. It's before this. I mean, not Chicagoland Speedway just laid off a ton of their workers. NASCAR's laid off a ton of workers, and even before all this, it didn't seem likely North Wilkesboro was coming back anytime soon. Now with this hiccup, with this roadblock that's happened, money is tighter than ever, and North Wilkesboro Speedway is not a guaranteed moneymaker by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, you'd have to pour a lot of money into it up front, and it might take you a long time to make that money back. And so it's tricky. I'm talking in circles now, which I sometimes am prone to do on this show, but I guess I'm always trying to cover all my bases. I'm always trying to make sure I hit on everything, and it's very stream of consciousness on this show from time to time. I don't mean to end this on a down note. I'd love to see North Wilkesboro come back one day, but like I said before, it's going to take someone with a lot of money and a lot of heart and admiration for the racetrack to make it happen. It's not going to be a penny pincher in a corporate suit somewhere. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Anyway, I talked about that for way too long. Let's put this race on the groovy gauge. Today's virtual race at North Wilkesboro Speedway, 90%. It was really good, right on par with some of the other better races. Not as much fun as Talladega was a couple weeks ago. It was really cool, of course, to see the racetrack back in its glory days, looking great like that. It was great to see a lot of good racing. But Talladega a few weeks back just had it all. It was beautiful. This race was really good, but not quite to Talladega level. So I'll give it a very good 90%. One of the better races of this Pro Invitational for sure. Ends it on a positive note. I'll be really curious to see what the TV ratings look like later this week. A lot of hype went into this, given that it's North Wilkesboro making its return. I'll be curious to see what sort of bump that might have had on the TV rating side of things. But it was really great. This whole Pro Invitational, big success, in my opinion. I said this last week after the race at Dover. I think the Pro Invitational, when it's all said and done, will be seen as a huge success and a big moment for NASCAR, and especially for the sim racing community. That's a no-brainer. But from NASCAR's standpoint, in this day and age where there are no other or very few other live sports on television, I'm sure, and it's been proven in some of the data that's come out, that a lot of fans who aren't really NASCAR fans have tuned into a lot of these races and have at least been somewhat intrigued by what they've seen. And so there's a very real possibility that some of those fans will carry over to the real racing product once that comes out in the next few days. But we'll have to wait and see. I think overall, the fact that NASCAR was able to continue to put on a show in a safe way during this pandemic, while a lot of other major sports have not been able to, is very important and very impressive. So it's been great to see. All in all, the Pro Invitational, huge success. iRacing, NASCAR, Fox, everyone, huge pat on the back. This was fun to watch. I had a fun time watching each race, reacting to each race, doing the pre-race show with Jordan Anderson and Raja Caruth before each race. A lot of fun talking to all of you online about these races and about iRacing. I've learned a whole lot about the sim racing platform in the last few weeks, and very exciting stuff. I think iRacing is going to continue to grow even after this suspension, after this hiatus and everything. It's going to continue to grow, and this is going to be looked back as arguably the most important 2-month span in its existence. So good news all around for pretty much everyone. I'm excited to have real race cars back. That's definitely going to be fun to talk about next week. But yeah, that's all I've really got to say. Thank you for watching this episode, y'all. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, subscribe, of course, if you are new. We talk about NASCAR every week, throughout the entire year. Even during this pandemic, we are not stopping at all. So support the channel if you can, subscribe. And a big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters. These amazing folks go above and beyond each and every month to help support the videos, support the channel. So if you also want to help support me, you can check out that top link down below in the description. I greatly appreciate it, y'all. Looking ahead to real racing returning, Darlington, May 17th, this coming Sunday. Gonna be awesome. Hope everyone has a happy Mother's Day tomorrow. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. I'll be back very shortly with more videos. Got some stuff planned for this week before we go back to real racing, and I'm excited to share them with you. Yeah, thanks for watching, buddy. We'll see you again very soon. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.